G'day everyone and welcome to the weekend special. I'm Dave Pellowe and joining me is Professor Augusto Zimmermann. Welcome.
So good to see you, Dave.
Now you've been so good to fly across from Perth and being in the general vicinity of the Good Sauce Studios. You popped in today to have a little conversation. We're going to go out for lunch afterward, which of course is the whole reason you flew out to the East Coast.
May all that you stand for and that we stand for be preserved under the providence of God for the happiness of mankind.
The trouble is caused by unthinking people who carelessly throw away ageless ideals as if they were old and outworn machinery.
But it is the values of individual liberty, equality before the law and the supremacy of people over the state to which we can always with confidence return as a powerful and uniting force.
Australia is not a secular country, it is a free country.
If you would like permanent behind the scenes access, seeing the unfiltered conversations, etc. that go on, please head to davepellowe.com and sign up to be a monthly supporter. We can't do this full time, fighting the good fight and fighting fake news without your help. So thank you to the supporters who are already involved. Now, we haven't got a great deal planned for this conversation, but let's talk first of all, you being on the other side of the continent you now live on. You actually came from a different continent altogether, Brazil. What's the political status of Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil at the moment? Is he coming up to an election time?
Yes, the presidential election, at least the first round of this election, is on Sunday, so tomorrow, actually. And he is an extraordinary character because the slogan of his electoral campaign is God, family, and country.
Wow.
And he's very pro-life and he's doing an outstanding job. And that's why, for obvious reasons, he's being vilified by the mainstream media. You see, he's called a fascist for being against the pro-death culture of the radical left. And you know that Latin America has a propensity of choosing very bad rulers. So it's quite miraculous that they finally started to vote more properly. And I'm really worried about the electronic voting there because it seems that those who oversee the election are now very clearly opposing to him. It's good that they are so radical that they cannot control themselves and they express their bias on a daily basis. So Bolsonaro is hated by all the usual suspicious people. You see the judges, politicians, and even the mainstream, internationally speaking, the international media.
Now, he was hated in his last campaign.
Yes,
when he won.
They tried to kill him even.
Wow.
Yeah, he suffered an assassination attempt, and he didn't die miraculously. This guy clearly...
Was he hurt?
Totally. He almost died. The knife was just 1 millimeter away from his heart. So it's a miracle in itself that he managed to survive. I actually know him personally because his ex-wife was actually my law student when I started my academic career over there.
Is he still friends with his ex-wife?
Totally so.
Okay.
And
so it's still a good introduction
and
for
I
you.
have been exchanging messages with him almost on a daily basis now.
Wow.
Yeah.
With Bolsonaro?
With Bolsonaro. And he is such a lovely person. He deserves all the support that we can give to him. And I hope and pray that Brazilians will make a wise decision of returning him to power.
Yeah.
But also that we will fix the problem with electronic voting. If he gets re-elected, we have to make sure that vote is actually transparent and you can actually see the ballot paper, because that's not the case at the moment. And I just don't trust in this sort of lack of transparency. But let's see what's
electronic voting is ripe for fraud.
Absolutely.
And I hope we keep that out of Australia forever.
Totally.
There's things we need to do to strengthen our voting, but I have a lot of confidence that it's largely integrous. The results handwritten, hand-counted, verified. There's computers involved at some stage, but its complete paper trail is always
and
there.
That's why the Constitutional Court in Germany, the Bundesverfassungsgericht, made a decision about 7 years ago, saying that it is entirely unconstitutional to have electronic voting. It's actually prohibited in accordance with a decision of the Constitutional Court of Germany.
Wow.
that's very important development, because now, at least in that particular country, electronic voting is now forbidden.
I want to stick to the topic of Christian nationalism, and that's essentially what you've described. And Christian nationalism is used as an insult. It's a pejorative label used by left wingers and liberal progressives to describe what I would describe as Christians, authentic Christians, Bible-believing Christians, mandate commission meeting, authentic practicing Christians.
Yes.
Jesus said, "Go and make disciples of all nations,
Exactly.
teaching them whatsoever I have taught you, and whatever you've seen and observed in my name. Disciple, baptize them, cast out the demons, heal the sick." But it wasn't just talking about people groups, and it was a multiple level thing there. But he also said to be salt and light. And light dispels darkness and every shadow from every corner. But it also, salt also flavors and changes the environment that it's in. And this Christian nationalism is something that Lance Wallner has come in under attack from the lying harlot media. In the Rolling Stone magazine recently, they were calling him a dominionist, and they've got all these labels to attach to it. But the election in Italy and Bolsonaro's platform is incredibly benign and Christian, and that's what the leftists hate about it: God, family, and nation, and country. I mean, that's just patriotism. That's
absolutely.
That's not racism or fascism.
Not at all, but there is a more sinister agenda behind. That everybody who tries to protect their people is facing this situation. The European Union is a good example, and they were unhappy with the fact that the British people decided to leave Brexit. But that is a part of this globalist plan to undermine or to basically destroy national borders. And that will facilitate the advent of something that in Scripture is called the global government and the advent of the Antichrist. So it's very clear that this globalist agenda is pushing for the undermining of nationalities and national borders in general. But we have to bear in mind that in the past, the elites used to have some sort of appreciation for the little people, as they used to say, and they continue to say so. They had this protective approach and paternalistic approach that I'm not necessarily in favor. But they seem to have some love for people. But because the worldview has changed and they have ceased to be Christians, now I think they have a very ungodly and anti-human agenda that they are pushing very clearly. And the climate change has become this sort of means by which we can promote such things as population control and potentially reduction of the population. And what makes me rather suspicious more recently about some novelties that we are facing is that it comes from the same group that has been so pro-death, and now they claim to be creating things to save lives, which is actually, you have to be very naive to believe that these groups have really an intention to save lives, if they have for such a long time promoted this death, the culture of death in the West.
Compare Bolsonaro's campaign with what you know of the new Prime Minister of Italy. Do you know enough to comment? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
She appears to be a very brave and courageous lady, and I think the fact that Italy is now trying to have a conservative alternative to so many years of mismanaged by the left, it's actually bears some resemblance to what is taking place in Brazil, because in both countries, the left has already caused enough damage to these societies, and the constant violations of human rights have been so much part of the history in these two nations. During the COVID, if you didn't have in Brazil a character such as Bolsonaro, probably millions of people would die of starvation, because the local oligarchs, the mayors and governors, were pushing for lockdowns. And he stood very boldly against this, and he said that people have the right to have a choice. He, on a personal level, decided to not be vaccinated. But he at the same time said that everybody can do whatever they want, and they take responsibility for the decisions they make. But he would not get the jab, and he would not have his children. But he gave freedom, and he said that people have the right
That's all
to
we
choose.
want.
Exactly. What we want is freedom.
Yeah. Propagandize all the medicine you want till the cows come home. If a government genuinely feels that a particular medical therapy or protocol is warranted and advantageous, then they should make that available. They should make it affordable or free, and they should give people every encouragement and education, bit of information necessary.
Yeah, it makes you
to make the best
suspicious when they
choice.
coerce these things. I mean,
Well,
why
that's
on earth
it.
they want to
I mean,
coerce
why
people?
did they take the power away from GPs consulting with patients?
Exactly.
Your local doctor consulting with you, making a private decision,
And not only that,
should be all the authority you need to do
punish
anything
them.
medically.
Exactly. And they are punishing people. You see that GPs who decided to give the prescription so that those who were not needing to be subject to this experiment were actually punished for that. And my GP, for instance, lost his license as a result.
So many did.
Yeah.
I was in another part of Australia recently, and there was a secret meeting going on. This meeting was so secret, it was invitation only. And I was unfortunate not to be able to go because I had to catch a plane, and it was some distance from the airport at the same time as I needed to leave. But one of the conditions of going to this meeting was you had to leave your phone at the door. You couldn't take your phone with you. And the reason why all this secrecy was because doctors were speaking their conscience, speaking their mind, telling the truth, being scientifically interrogative. They were asking the right questions. That science should ask questions. And that jeopardized their careers, hence the secrecy. If they wanted to tell the truth, they had to not just swear everyone to silence, but enforce secrecy.
Isn't that incredible? One thing I have to say is that for so many years, they have advocated for assisted suicide, abortion, these sort of things. And suddenly they developed a concern for human life. That's the same people who have been pushing for this very, very diabolical agenda. And another thing I have to say is that it doesn't really matter whether the vaccine is actually efficient or not. It doesn't really matter. My perspective is not of a medical doctor, because it's not my area. My area is protection of fundamental rights, of human rights and freedoms. And as a human rights activist, in a good sense of the word, I can say to you that it is a very dangerous thing to have governments interfering with your bodily autonomy.
100%.
I mean, I'm quite amazed with that.
This is fascism. So
absolutely.
Just to bring this conversation back to a loop, I've been looking for a quote I typed this morning. I found it, and I'll share it in just a second. But when this COVID all started, I had some private conversations with some Liberal Party MPs, good, Christian, conservative, Liberal MPs. This is the best of them. And I said, why aren't you asking questions? They're taking our rights off us. They're locking us down. This is definitively illiberal. Why aren't you speaking out? And there was a fear there. There was a fear of getting it wrong. There was a fear of this risk being so big that they come out criticizing the measures and we're on the wrong side of the risk quotient. And I said, I don't care if this is risky. I don't care if this is the bubonic plague or the Black Death, and 3 in 10 people are going to die if they catch it, the people who catch it. I mean, I care about people dying, but it doesn't change the fact of first principles that individual rights are unviolable by governments. And the people calling the Prime Minister of Italy and the President of Brazil fascists, and the people who think like you and I, fascists, fundamentally misunderstand the history, origin, identity, and definition of fascism.
Of course, you see. That
let me read this.
Absolutely.
This is what fascism was invented by an Italian, Giovanni Gentile.
Yes.
And this is what's said about Giovanni. Giovanni Gentile holds the dishonor of having been the official philosopher of fascism in Italy. Benito Mussolini was the first fascist dictator. Hitler came after him and they were close friends, got on well. Giovanni Gentile's his philosophical basis for fascism was rooted in his understanding of ontology and epistemology, in which he found vindication for the rejection of individualism and acceptance of collectivism,
Exactly.
with the state as the ultimate location of authority and loyalty, outside of which individuality had no meaning, and which in turn helped justify the totalitarian dimension of fascism. Does that sound like small government conservatives?
No, absolutely.
Does that sound like the people criticizing small government?
The fascist ideology is actually a combination of the anarchism that he learned from his mother and the Marxism that he got from his father. Mussolini was the head of the Socialist Party in Italy. And the fact that he had to break away from the fascist movement was a result of the fact that he had been instructed by Lenin, who considered him to be his equivalent in Italy. He was told by Lenin that it would be an appropriate moment for the takeover of the communists in Italy. And then Mussolini realized that rather than being an international socialist, he was actually a national socialist. But National Socialism and International Socialism can come from the same root. And it's totally collectivist. It's against the idea of individual rights and freedoms.
But this is exactly what all the COVID jackbooted thugs who refused individual liberty were. They were fascist. They said the best interests of the collective outweigh the interests and rights and inherent God-given liberties of every individual. Communism, collectivism versus individualism. Bolsonaro, the Italian Prime Minister, you and I, we're the opposite of fascists.
Exactly, the very opposite, indeed. Certainly what Bolsonaro, for instance, did was to make sure that his people would not be in lockdowns and therefore losing their jobs and potentially facing starvation even. But more than that, I have to say about him is that he saved the world for massive famine, because Biden instructed the Brazilian government to not make a deal with Russia regarding fertilizers. And he said, I cannot do such a thing, because otherwise we're not going to have enough food for our own people. But the Brazilians are the fourth largest exporters of food in the world.
Wow.
So he saved the world from world famine. And we should thank God and thank him for saving millions and millions of lives.
Yep.
And nobody gives credit to this. He is a total hero, this guy.
I agree. Let's talk about his election prospects. Are you aware of how the polls are going there? Is it looking good for him, looking bad for him?
It's looking pretty good, because he is the first person in history to reduce the size of government. Look, the opposite of fascism.
Yes.
He reduced the size of the state, and he reduced taxes. 2 years ago, before COVID, I was visiting Brazil, and I was amazed to see how the culture had been reshaped by this new patriotic movement in Brazil. They were on the streets to demand a small government. Can you imagine if this one day will happen in Australia? That would be so amazing, because Australians worship government. And when I was in Brazil, I saw people protesting against the presence of government in their lives and fighting for lower taxes and more freedom.
Yeah.
I would love to see this one day to happen here. And they finished their events with the Lord's Prayer. Everybody asking God to bless. That's why I'm so confident about Brazil as being a major powerhouse and force for good in this world, because there's so many people praying and doing the right thing over there.
Is there any data? I mean, we want good government to win, and we think good government should win. But the reality is, like you said, Australians worship big government.
Yeah.
And so the good guys, the freedom guys, the small government guys lose sometimes.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it wasn't advocated by a major party with the media mouthpieces that the Liberal Party had. I think if the Liberal Party had have advocated freedom like the Italian Prime Minister did, then they would have won.
That's the point.
But the minor parties just didn't have the cut through and didn't get the votes. Bolsonaro having that media platform, having access to them, and despite having their hate, are the Brazilians going to be like Australians?
Well, I think the point is that they have a real leader, and a person who is not or pretending to be a Christian. Scott Morrison was not nearly close to Bolsonaro in his commitment to biblical worldview. And it's quite
he
clear
was closer to fascist.
Exactly. And he behaved in a very authoritarian manner. You see, even these appointments, secret appointments that he made. I was having a chat with a friend of mine yesterday. I'm quite amazed also that the Governor General didn't speak out, but I was even told by people who published my articles to not be raising this issue. But I don't think it's just the fault of the Prime Minister. As if he had made these appointments at once, all the appointments, he could pretend or claim at least to be deceived, perhaps, or to have committed a mistake. But bear in mind that these were appointments made over a 1-year period, and all done in secrecy, which completely undermines transparency and the legitimacy of the whole process. You should have a democracy, and in a democracy, people have the right to know what governments are doing. And it's an indication of his narcissistic behavior. And when we blame the Labour Party, we have to bear in mind that during this period of very oppressive period, whereby even pregnant ladies were being arrested and handcuffed in front of their kids at home, Scott Morrison was giving support. He even came to the point of saying that he supported what Dan Andrews was doing in Victoria. He had the means available to stop with that madness that was being done and carried out by the premiers. But he gave not only tacit, but sometimes explicit support to what they were executing.
Very much.
I mean, he had the Constitution at his disposal.
He didn't just support it, he facilitated
and
it.
he claims to be such a person who advocates for the good of a society, but he had the mechanisms available, including international law. He could have used the external affairs power, and he could actually appeal to common law principles of bodily autonomy. These are based on jurisprudence of the High Court and other courts all over the world.
Yeah.
So he totally miserably betrayed us. But from the very beginning, he manifested his authoritarian colors when he said that vaccine should be as mandatory as possible.
Yeah.
So that was a message sent to the ruling oligarchs at local level that they could do whatever they wanted. He gave them the green light for that.
Well, the Liberal leader in Victoria is way worse than Scott Morrison, way worse than Stephen Marshall, probably as bad as Zach Kirkup.
Yeah.
Victorian Liberals are dead in the water. There's no chance they can win the election.
Yeah.
Do you think Dominic Perrottet has a chance in the New South Wales election in March?
Well, I was disappointed with him recently when that lovely chap, the Brexit guy, Nigel Farage, was there. And I was told that they faced a similar issue that you did a couple of years ago when you invited other speakers. We would expect this to come from the Socialist Republic of Victoria, but that actually was done by the police in New South Wales, finding that it was not as high as $70,000, but
no,
it was
only $3,000. It was
$3,000.
The principle was
protection, that they have to be security reasons.
No doubt. I kind of doubt that came from Perrottet or his government, and maybe some in the government. He's got a lot of left-wing ministers in his cabinet.
Absolutely.
But I no doubt it was just the political command ranks.
I agree with you, but think about that.
In the
that
police.
Guy who is the health minister is completely deranged.
Oh,
I think he should be looked after because he's not normal, that guy.
Yeah.
And why on earth a deranged character like that? I can say that I'm not worried about it. But think about what he did during COVID. That guy isn't. I mean, his behavior is so appalling that I prefer not to say anything now because I don't want to get into trouble.
Yeah.
But then you know what is coming into my mind about him. How on earth you have that health minister is still doing that destructive job of this? He actually forced people into vaccination and did terrible things.
Yeah. And
he is there. Remains as a health minister under the watch of this person who I hope and pray that he will be doing the right thing. So I hope that my assessment of him is not so fair. But
no, thank you. That's all useful. Well, we've run to the end of the time that we have available. And I just want to thank you again, Augusto, for taking time, visiting the other side of Australia to come into the studios and record this conversation.
It's a privilege, Dave. I must say that I really love this man, and he's doing an excellent job. You have to support this person, as I do support, give my 100% of support to Dave.
Thank you, sir.
He's a courageous man. You have my support and my admiration, I must say.
Wow, thank you. Well, that's it for this episode. If you would like to become a supporter, head to davepellowe.com. A little bit each month, $10, $20, $50 will definitely go a long way. If you can't speak out in your private world because of risks to your career and other positions, then please send me. I'll speak on your behalf. We need more independent, robust, fearless voices. I am beyond cancelling because of your support. So thank you very much, and please share this video, like and subscribe, and make sure you also subscribe to the newsletter when you're on davepellowe.com. And that's the end of this episode. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Today, we need a special kind of courage. Not the kind needed in battle, but a kind which makes us stand up for everything that we know is right, everything that is true and honest. We need the kind of courage that can withstand the subtle corruption of the cynics, so that we can show the world that we are not afraid of the future.